Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. You're watching The Naturalist Capitalist, and I'm Reed Coverdale, and I've got a guest on the show today, David Pearce. How you doing?
Chilling, man. Like and subscribe to this channel. Subscribe to mine.
Absolutely, yeah. So I just met you like an hour ago. We were just doing a video call, and you describe yourself as a leftist, but a lot of the things you were saying in that video call were verbatim what I would say is wrong with our economy, what's wrong with our government. And I just thought that was interesting. I thought we could have an interesting, productive conversation. So just tell us a little bit about not necessarily your political views, but just your background and what you've done and what you're doing right now.
Yeah, we'll get to the political views soon, but my parents were both born in Cuba. They were both peasant farmers moving to the United States. They went to California, then they went to Miami again. And I had the opportunity to grow up in this country. I'm now in the military. Before joining the military, I worked in Democratic Party communications. So I guess I would have before described myself as a liberal, more of a like Vox.com technocrat oriented. That was like where my politics was before joining the military. After joining the military, I decided that I was weak on the area of foreign policy. And yeah, I used the military, not use the military, but once I joined the military was really when I think I did a lot of my best intellectual developments when it comes to politics. But yeah, just a little bit more before we get into the politics. About me, I was always somebody that was interested in systems. Like I have my bachelor's in economics. I have my master's in political philosophy. But one of the reasons why I chose economics as my bachelor's was because the 2007-2008 financial crisis happened, and people were like, the economy crashed, so people lost their jobs and lost their homes. And coming out of high school, I was just like, I don't know what that means. Like, what? Like, what do you mean the economy crashed and people started committing suicide? I was just like, I don't know what that means. So that's why I chose economics. And then I started watching movies like Inside Job and Big Short when it came out quite recently. And you just kind of learn about how some of the problems that we're dealing with on a vast societal scale are just so structural in nature. And I've always been somebody that's just been like interested in knowledge, curiosity. Some of my non-political stuff, I'm really into like fasting. I'm really into like working out. I love VR. You see the headset back there. I like shooting guns. And yeah, like I'm into jujitsu. So that's kind of like me, who I am, like personally.
Cool. So when it comes to politics, what would you say your guiding principle is? What is your worldview on what government should be, on what society should be, and how far away are we from that now, and how do we move toward what your ideal system would be?
Yeah, too easy. So if hopefully this doesn't go over the heads of people that are not kind of like economically minded in terms of like the discipline of economics. Like there's a production possibilities curve, right? Of what is capable, what can the nation do? Like basically the totality of what you are able to do as a nation state. And I think that the United States does more foreign policy than it does domestic policy. We are not taking care of our own people. So, you know, in terms of like where we are versus where I wish we were, I wish we did less war, less international offense, and more just national defense. And let's take care of our own people. And if you read the book 1984, which I've read many times, they kind of hint and allude at the fact that when you have a state that is focused on constant war, it's kind of this way of shoring up artificial support for the current regime while actually not doing anything for your people. You ramp up surveillance, you ramp up austerity, you ramp up just like corporate control of everything, which is like kind of where I think the United States is. And I think that 1984 is a must reread. I think you should read it more than once. And that's kind of where my politics come from. I just feel like war is the worst thing in the world, and like just that right there. War is the worst thing in the world. I mean, can you argue with it? I mean, maybe you could. I'm not saying you personally, just talking to our audience. And yeah, that's kind of where my politics stem from. I call myself a leftist because I don't think that you can be a leftist without being anti-war and wanting better for the people around you instead of worrying so much about what this person in Korea or this person in Cuba. Cuba's a shame because that's where my family's from, and they're right there, less than 100 miles. And like, just because they have a different ideology set, we're gonna sanction them? And I don't know,
Right.
like, just a lot of stuff that the U.S. does is goofy.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think I confuse a lot of people because, they see my username, just my username to a lot of people seems contradictory, naturalist, capitalist. They're like, how do you not want to just pave the entire world in sidewalks? And then they hear a lot of my views, like I'm an environmentalist, I'm anti-war, I'm anti-corporate control, like all these things that they really find surprising. And, you'd really have to sit down with me and have an hour-long conversation about what my views are, why I think certain policies would lead us in a certain direction. What I think is cool is, doing that video we were just on a little while ago, realizing that connection with you, with almost everything you said in that video. And I think that people who identify as being on the left and people who identify as being libertarians, I don't think our goals for the future are mutually exclusive. I think there are ways that we can get to the same destination if we are willing to compromise a little bit on how we want to get there. So I think some of the ways that the left wants to get there are a little authoritarian. And then I think some ways that libertarians want to get there are a little unrealistic. They're not going to work. So I believe in things like, environmental regulations. I think the government has to have some foothold in what you're allowed to put into the water, what you're allowed to put into the air, because if we just leave that to the marketplace, there can be corruption, things can go wrong. So I think that's an area where they have to step in. And then what I would say to people on the left who want things like Medicare for all, when you want the same oligarchs who have destroyed our country and our government to be in charge of things like healthcare and education, I don't think that's the best solution. I think the best solution is trying to get people into things like insurance cooperatives where you have customer-owned entities. They're not run by wealthy insurance companies, so everyone has a stake in them. And moving things in a societal bottom-up structure of improving the lives of people around us instead of trying to have these same people who have completely corrupted everything to give us a positive top-down change. So what do you think about that? Do you think there is a possible way for us to come together and unite against authoritarianism and imperialism and corporatism, oligarchy, or are the differences between the libertarians and the left, are they too great? Just kind of what do you think about that?
I think that what should you say? A exact definition or just a definition of the left in America is in order. Just to allude to some of the things that you said before, the left right now is the Democratic Party, which is not a leftist party. By no means is it. For all of our viewers, just the Democratic Party is not left. The Democratic Party is like center right, in my opinion. But what do I know? And all of the leftists are on Twitter or making YouTube channels. And in terms of what you said about the same people controlling healthcare and like, I guess giving people what they want as opposed to just giving foreigners war, I think the solution is one and the same in the sort of sense where it's like, I think because we have these awful people in charge of our society is why we have the outcomes that we have. Like, we're not going to get Medicare for all and college or I should say, an education program where people are not in debt because they just want to get smarter, they want to get healthier. We're not going to have that with the current people that we have. So I don't know if you would call it a disagreement, but I guess what I'm trying to say is it's like we have the current dynamics that we have right now because of how oligarchical and money controlled our system is, and because of the people that are in it right now that are elected and unelected. Unelected more so. There are more unelected bureaucrats that control what is going on in American society more than our elected politicians, as shitty as they are
Right.
dictating the outcomes of our American society. So I think the answer is one and the same. Maybe it's a change of system, or maybe it's just the uprooting of all of these people that are currently in power that are controlled by money. And it's like, make money in politics not a factor. Remove these like corporate controlled assholes from elected power, and from unelected power, remove the oligarchical controlled influences on that front. There's a lot of money to be made with war and imperialism and international offense as opposed to just national defense and then taking care of your people. Like, yeah, I don't know if you have a follow-up question for that. There's something feels left unsaid here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's unfortunate that we put these labels like left and right and libertarian to everything. I mean, I think that, a lot of ideas that people would call left, I'm completely in agreement with, and I would not really consider myself to be a leftist, so I think it's just unfortunate that there's that divide, like people, like you and I both supported Tulsi Gabbard. I didn't consider her that left. I was into her because she was libertarian, small L libertarian, in my opinion, like on a lot of things. She wasn't this person who just wanted the government to control everything. She wanted to get us out of the wars. She believed in individual freedom to do what you want with your own property and your own body. So like that was why I liked her. And people would get upset that I liked her because they were on the left and I'm a libertarian. And I'd be like, you shouldn't be upset about that. That should be a sign that there's room for us to work together. What you were saying about government, Tulsi was kind of my last campaign that I was throwing in for good government instead of just uprooting.
Why did you like Tulsi Gabbard? Could I ask you that?
Yeah, so I agreed with her on probably 75% of the issues. Most of the disagreements were on fiscal policy, but people forget, they say foreign policy is one issue. I mean, arms deals with Saudi Arabia is one issue. Foreign policy covers such a vast array of issues. That's like saying social policy is one issue. It's like, no, social policy is, abortion is one issue, gun control is one issue,
Domestic policy is one issue. I see what you mean.
Yeah, I mean, so foreign policy and most of her social policy, I was pretty much completely on board with. There were some things on foreign policy I didn't agree with her on. I mean, she was a little more hawkish than I am on the war on terror, bombing terrorists. I don't necessarily think that that's a solution. I think that causes more terrorism. I think we, and she's kind of drone strike happy for me. And so there were some things I disagreed with her on, but compared to everyone else on foreign policy, she was way better. And then domestic policy, like the war on drugs, mass incarceration, pretty much everything on there except for some gun control things I agreed with her on. And then fiscal policy, it was mostly disagreement, but there were some areas we agreed on. Like she did talk a lot about the debt, and she talked about auditing the Federal Reserve, areas I definitely agreed with her on. And then the parts that I disagreed with her on, if we were to accomplish everything else that she was talking about, if we were able to pull out of the Middle East, if we were able to end the war on drugs, end mass incarceration, like, sure, if you want to try to get this government to run healthcare, run education, whatever, okay, fine. I mean, it's probably not going to pass anyway, but like that was a worthy enough gamble for me with everything else that I had in common with her, if that makes sense.
Yeah, one of the things that I was thinking about was Tulsi Gabbard, if she actually became president, would have both the Democratic and the Republican Party, pro-war corporate parties, fighting against some of the issues, well, most of the issues, all of the issues that you and I kind of like her for. And the disagreements that we have with her are important disagreements, but I think that that would be subsumed by kind of the visceral hate that she would find from both parties in trying to end wars and
Right.
I don't know, like just do more things for the environment. And I mean, she was even for UBI along with Andrew Yang, who kind of started me on this YouTube channel, track. And we
Yep.
can talk about UBI later because I think that like UBI is like such an interesting topic. Like UBI is so interesting to me. But anyways, yeah, like Tulsi Gabbard, she isn't like a Clinton. She isn't an Obama, like Bush type. She isn't like somebody that has like that dynastic like legacy influence. And I think that one of the things that an American president could do, like one of the best things that you could do if you're actually a good person, because you're not going to get any of your policies to really pass because there's just so much money in our current system, would be to constantly talk about the possibility of a better system existing as opposed to what we have now and me being the leader of it and what can I do as a leader in our current system, and just try to open people's minds up like constantly every day, putting out like a YouTube video, like instead of having a state of the union speech every single year, you just do it every single day and like try to talk to Americans about like how different possibilities exist. But just with corporate media and our current brand of politicians, it's like you're not going to get anything from these corporately owned structures. I mean, corporations own our military, our media, and our politicians. And the way that I think that they keep some of that control is by you kind of reduce the thinking or the possibilities of what can exist, and we're constantly talking about the same things: social cultural issues. We're talking about like abortion and guns, racism and sexuality, but none of these things are actually like gonna like having these arguments on those issues isn't gonna make anything better. I think that those things fix themselves on their own when we just have less war and take care of our people more. So yeah, if Tulsi Gabbard or anybody wanted to just get on that bully pulpit and just talk that good shit every single day, and hell, if you could get some of your policies to pass, all the better. But yeah, I think that there's just like this real aversion to doing good in American politics because of the, more vast than unelected bureaucracy. The unelected bureaucracy just kind of tampers down what is possible in America. And then the elected officials, they just are, very small brain, kind of smooth brain thinkers.
Yeah. I mean, that's why I'm a libertarian, because you have someone as good as Tulsi Gabbard or as someone as, seemingly staunchly progressive and principled as Bernie Sanders. Like you have these people who really advocate these ideas. And I said this on the video chat we were on about an hour ago. To me, progressives in general, like they all sell out. They all talk big, and then when the chips are down, they just vote with the oligarchy. The only people you see, regardless of whether or not you agree with them, who stand up and will just vote no are libertarian leaning Republicans and the one libertarian who's in Congress right now. And to me, like we're at that point where we just need people to say, no, I'm not voting for this. And they always, when they have these omnibus bills, they try to jam this little bit of gold into the bill. Like you got to vote for this so your constituents can get this, or you got to vote for it because it got this tiny little, shiny piece in it. But the bill as a whole is just absolutely terrible. And both sides will just vote for it in droves. And you see very few people stand up. Like when Thomas Massey stood up against voting for the CARES Act, he got eviscerated by, the Republicans, the Democrats, Donald Trump, Nancy Pelosi, like everybody. He was just completely vilified. But we need people who are going to do that, because we're fooling ourselves if we think that, by voting for these little amendments we can squeeze into these bills, we're going to make this government better. It's the same argument as, we just got to vote for Hillary this year against Trump. We just got to vote for Trump against Biden this year. I mean, that's how we end up where we are today. And that's how we're going to just keep making government worse and worse. So I just really believe in rolling things back, voting no on things, because the more we add, the worse it gets. And I think that that's a pattern that's not going to change. I don't think it's suddenly going to turn into benevolent legislation that fixes things. I think it's really about rolling back this horrible system we have. And then if we can have a government that is more representative of the people with a good track record, then I'd be open to talking about, like, okay, why don't we try this? This sounds like a good program. I actually think the government would install this program and use it responsibly. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, excuse me. I think some of the less intellectual kind of, people that think really hard, like people that are not like that. I'm not saying you're this person. I actually find you quite thoughtful. But in terms of like libertarians that they want to roll things back, they usually focus on domestic policy. I would tell most libertarians that it's like, I mean, we do more foreign policy than domestic policy. And yeah, none of those two things are one thing in and of themselves, but America just does a lot abroad that if you actually wanted to do some good in your nation, you first have to stop doing so much stupid shit abroad, in my opinion. And what's the thing that you said that I wanted to bounce off of? Yeah, I guess just in general, I look at our government, our current form of government, and I don't really think that there's a lot that is politically possible if we keep going the same way. Yeah, pretty much just that, right? Like, I love thinking about politics along with my other interests. And as an American that wants the best for America, it's just tough to kind of constantly be thinking about like some of the things that like mainstream media wants us to think about. But even like, independent media, we're talking about the same things, but just with a different like lens. And yeah, there's something fundamentally wrong with the system that we have right now. I don't know if you have any other questions that you want to ask me.
Yeah, I mean, I think all the libertarians I know, their number one issue is foreign policy. You were saying that most of the ones you meet, you think they're at domestic policy, but pretty much everyone I know and every candidate I've had on this show who's running for some office, like that's pretty much all of their number one issue. Like, we have to end this destructive foreign policy. And some of them have even said, like, I would, rather invest in education, or rather invest in healthcare, or rather invest in protecting the environment. Like, in general, I would like to return these programs to the people, take them away from the state. But if we are going to have government, I would rather spend it on the people than bombing brown people in other countries or deporting immigrants, so I think the Libertarian Party and the people in it that really care about foreign policy before anything else. But I don't know if you want to respond to that.
Just to quickly bounce off of that. I mean, I love you bringing in kind of that, I guess like that paraphrasing of George Carlin's joke where he's just like, what do we do best? We bomb black and brown people. We don't do anything else good anymore. We can't make a car worth of shit. We can't make a TV worth of shit. Like, I love that whole routine. If our viewers haven't checked out, just Google like George Carlin war. I don't know, like maybe that will come up. But yeah, indeed, I think it's nice to hear that like a lot of the libertarians that you're in contact with, they focus on foreign policy, because I mean, yeah, that 1984 perspective on war, where it just kind of takes up all the energy that we could be using to do good, it just uses it up. And then what do we have left to do domestic policy? Basically nothing. So when people are going to ask for relief from their healthcare issues or their student loan issues, it's like, no, like the people who own government are the same people that love making weapons, selling weapons, and fucking with other countries and their business. And it's unfortunate. I think that we can talk a little bit about UBI if you want to. But yeah, just in general with this system, to paraphrase Ron Paul, it's like we are wasting money abroad anyways. Why don't we just waste money on ourselves? So that's kind of the perspective that I take. I'm not saying waste the money on ourselves. I think that we could do a lot of good for ourselves, but yeah, we're wasting money abroad. Like if you think about the grand context of what we're doing, we are spending money to put military bases. We have over 800 um, foreign military bases just to like fuck with other people. And like we're all on the same planet. And my thing is, I'm just like, have whatever system that you want as long as you're not like violently oppressing foreigners first and foremost. And, obviously, like, don't mess with your own people and subjugate them. But man, maybe that's like a weird thing to say, but I think like the international violence takes precedent before we start talking about other countries' individual human rights errors, because that's happening all around the world. You want to shit on China for things that you don't know much about because you're an American, and like American media is telling you that China or Russia are doing these particular things with human rights, but it's like war is a human rights kind of error if you think about it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, let's close out talking about UBI. It's not a concept that I dislike. I actually, I listened a lot to Andrew Yang. I think he's a bit alarmist uh, in his estimations of how close we are to um, massive automation just taking away the amount of jobs he was talking about. I do think it's around the corner. And I do think for some of the jobs like call centers, things like that, I think he's right. But he was talking a lot about truck driving and more hands-on jobs that we are quite a ways from completely automating away from needing a human present. But the idea behind it, I think, is solid, and it's actually, in my opinion, the most free market solution that you could have if that were the case, if we actually automated away, 40% of the jobs. Because if you have a convoluted government program where there's so many loopholes and so many, so many requirements, and I mean, it can just get lost in the money can get lost in litigation, where if you were just directly giving cash to people, letting them spend it how they want it, that is a free market solution. What I would bring it back to is the government we have now couldn't even handle a one-time payment of $1,200 to citizens without bailing, giving billions and trillions of dollars to big business that didn't need it. So it really just comes back to the lack of trust of our government to administer such a program effectively and honestly. But as far as the actual idea goes, I'm not opposed to it, and I know a lot of other libertarians who aren't opposed to it. And even Milton Friedman, he had advocated for something similar called the negative income tax, and it was a similar idea. But that's kind of my opinion on it. But let's hear yours.
Yeah, so a big employer in the United States is the military, for example, and we do a decent amount of physical labor, but also just kind of maintenance of our own bodies. And we do a lot of like interpersonal talking. Like when you're running an organization, there's a lot of discussions that have to occur, especially if you're doing as much complex things as the military does. And I say that you can keep all of that structure and just do different things. Like, I mean, you can literally have tons of conversations, work on the maintenance of our own physical form, and, galvanize movements towards planting trees, fixing our infrastructure. And this is going to actually benefit the nation as opposed to like bombing black and brown people. That's like, you don't gain money from doing that. You're not like making your countrymen richer by doing something like that. So, in terms of like Yang saying that like robots are going to replace machines, there's just tons of things that humans do with each other, and I don't really think that like you can like have like some of the labor oriented jobs that humans do, robots just cannot do. Like, you can't make, and Yang has said this, you can't make a robot fix infrastructure. We're just not there yet. So there is some attrition as it relates to human labor that is going to be replaced by robot labor. But I agree with you in the sort of sense where it's like, he's a little bit alarmist in terms of like the effects that the effects that I guess modern capitalism is going to have on the economy, that UBI could help to kind of ameliorate. And another thing that I want to say is I think some of the more important things that Yang was bringing up with UBI that I think got less attention but deserved more attention were like the personal effects of capitalism on the human, like our actual form. People are committing suicide, using drugs, drinking more often, lower reported levels of happiness. And I actually think that that kind of stuff is more important because, I mean, there are plenty of nations that have a per capita less efficient, less productive economy than us, but per capita have higher levels of reported happiness. And I mean, I don't think that we're on the planet to raise a number. I think that we're on the planet to kind of figure out our own truths and to help the people around us. You know, broadly speaking, I'm sure there are like 4 or 5 of the things that you could add. And one of the things that I like about UBI is there's a concept in economics called velocity of money. Some people call it speed of money, but I mostly heard about this term in terms of money velocity or velocity of money. If you give a community money, they're going to cycle it through their community. Sure, some of it's going to go to Amazon and, you know, like online retailers. But if we have enough money to bail out large corporations just so that they do not fail, because we have this like attachment, we have this in America, we have this like attachment to propping up people who have already been legacy winners and who are already making tons of money because they're so big. It's like they're too big to fail.
Right.
But I think that it would be like a lot better to honestly, like if you're going to do it anyways, because there is a kind of like free market laissez-faire argument for just letting things ride. If you're going to bail out large corporations, I say bail out normal people. Like in 2007 and 2008, I think that instead of bailing out large corporations, I say that you just put like a temporary no evictions, no rent, no mortgage payments kind of a program and bail out all those people that lost their homes, that committed suicide, that turned to drug use and drinking, marriages broken up, families broken up. I mean, 2007 and 2008 was huge for America. We are still living with the effects of what happened back then. And we're right now currently anticipating another similar event. And it's just wild to me that it's like 2007 and 2008 happened. We're still dealing with those effects. And it's like people are in this coronavirus like time period. We're over here thinking about like how the dollar might crash. Like, you know, this is not a good place. We are not in a good place right now as, you know, as a nation, as a people. And there's so much that we could do well, better, but we're just not doing it, unfortunately.
Yeah, I want to touch on one thing you said there. I agree that the economy we have is very unhealthy and it destroys poor people's lives. It props up billionaires. So from the research I've done, what has enabled all of that is the government and the Federal Reserve. So if you look back in our economy before 2007, 2008, you know, what caused the housing crisis in effect was artificially low interest rates and a bubble economy built around houses. So the value of houses was highly inflated, and that was because of the government's hand in our monetary policy. And they're doing all those types of things again, like interest rates are incredibly low. We're encouraging people to buy stuff. You know, I was talking about this on our video chat that we had a while ago about consumerism, you know, and that is an intentional scheme from the media to get people to buy, borrow, spend. So I think a lot of people equate that with free market capitalism. That's what comes to their mind, just like buying as much stuff as you can. Where in a truly free market, all of this enablement to live that way would fall through the floor. People would be forced to live within their means. They wouldn't be able to borrow so much money. They wouldn't get loans that they can't afford to pay off. So that's kind of what the purpose of this show is, trying to bring those ideas forward. People who have a bad taste in their mouth when they hear capitalism, I think that they conflate it with crony capitalism, corporatism, and this oligarchical system that we have in place now. And I am just as much against it as any leftist that would ever talk to me.
And just a quick bounce off of, I guess you were alluding a little bit to the effects of advertising is what you kind of made me think of. I mean, when you think about what advertising is, both explicit advertising and I guess the effects that culture has on Americans that dictates that we have, this social programming that, hey, you're just going to buy stuff, work the job you're going to work at, but just keep buying stuff and, living beyond your means, as you were pointing out. At a certain point, your possessions come to own you, especially the more possessions you have. And I think that it's extremely unnatural in a bad direction that you have commercials and billboards and all that stuff. And we're talking theoretics right now, but if we can do things that natural is capitalist, the thing that I think about is first that natural part. I think that human beings are what they have been for a longer period of time as opposed to what we've recently become. I mean, we co-evolved with dogs about 25,000 years ago. The Industrial Revolution was about 200 to 250 years ago. Like agriculture was like 10,000 years ago, but what do you call it? So the scientific revolution was 500 years ago. So for like a lot of the things around us are changing who we are and changing our nature, and just buying a bunch of stuff and constantly getting messages about what you should be buying, it's very unnatural. And I don't think that human beings really need so much to be happy, but you're constantly getting these messages around you telling you what is going to make you happy. And, for women, advertising does this, what you should look like. And that shit is super unnatural. And unfortunately, we are where we are right now. And yeah, this isn't really like political, but that's just kind of what you made me think of. Like the stuff that you were saying made me think about advertising it.
Yeah. Well, we'll close out here, but just tell everyone who's watching how they can follow you. Tell us about your YouTube channel or any other social media that they can follow you on.
Yeah, you can follow me at Twitter, on Twitter at D Pearce, spelled PearceSSC. So D Pearce SSC, no underscores or anything like that. At D Pearce SSC. And on YouTube, you can find my channel, D period space Pearce space SSC. So I'm sure you can provide the link to your viewers there. But yeah, I just want to say, like, I appreciate having this conversation. I mean, one of my favorite things about the YouTube channel that I did not expect was it's actually like quite social. I'm happy very recently to have met a female who, I kind of started a relationship with that's like, in terms of like intellectual discussions, I can get that with her because I don't meet a lot of people like that personally. But like over the internet, I've been able to meet a lot of people that are interested in kind of sorting things out. So I appreciate the YouTube channel more for that than what I thought was my stated goal. Or I mean, it's still like a goal of mine on my channel, D Pearce SSC, to just spread good messages and unplug people. I think that that's the best thing that independent media can do, because we're definitely like not over here making bank and we're not getting like a wide reach. But the people that are watching, I think that it's important to maybe have that as a through line for all your videos. Like you're trying to like wake people up. I'm not saying I'm the most, I mean, the word woke is kind of derided these days, so I don't want to use the word woke. I guess just unplugging people from the matrix, man. Like there's a ton of people that are just batteries for our current system. You got to unplug from the matrix and realize how much, corporate oligarchy and robotic bullshit is around us. So yeah, I just appreciate the opportunity to come on the show, and nice meeting you like literally an hour or two ago. I met you like recently, and then it was just like, yeah, let's do a video. Fuck it.
Yeah.
Yeah, my
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on, man, and I'll have you back on again. We'll have to talk about more of this stuff.
Of course.
All right, we'll catch all you guys on the next episode.